I have a fancy new mic set up because I realized by touching the mic I was making noise and I didn't want to do that anymore. So this is my, as we call it in film business, rig. You can understand. It's the S word that comes before that. Okay, so every actor is different. Every actor has to cobble their own method together from what they learn out there and also from experience and the gigs that they've worked, what they found works for them, what doesn't, what moves them, what doesn't. And for the longest time, I felt like I didn't really have an individual method for my work. And I watched actors that auditioned for projects I've produced or in classes that I've been in do this incredible work that seemed so indelible and so unique. And I thought, well, I just don't have a voice or I don't have a perspective. And I think when you're in it, you don't see it. You can't see the forest for the trees. Or as a teacher once said to me, I can see what you can't because I am absent your need to see it. But I've been reflecting over the last few weeks being in a play and really diving into the material and trying to find what works for me. And I've realized I do have a sort of method, or I have a few things that I do that I think are unique to me, that I've developed over the 20 or so years that I've been acting. And I wanted to share those in case they were helpful to you. So here are 3 things that I do as an actor that are unique to me, that would form Kara's acting perspective. Not even a method, just a way that I approach the work. So number 1 is I create a map of the script in my body. I was doing this for years and I didn't really realize that's what I was doing until very recently, maybe like 5 years ago. Something that you probably, I think I've mentioned it on this channel before, may know about me is I read very slowly. I have a friend who can read a novel in a night. That is not me. I read very deliberately, I read very slowly, painstakingly, and for years it's driven me crazy because I feel like I can't ingest the same amount of material that other people can, and it drives me bonkers. But when I do read something, I do tend to remember a lot of it and remember moments, and God, is that so distracting? We're going to turn it around. But when I say that I'm building a map in my body, essentially what that means is I read the script to explore and experience and wonder. And that is my pathway into creating the map. And I know it happens when I can read the script and it feels like revisiting locations. So you could think of that in a couple of ways. You could think of that as like revisiting a place you've known, but it almost feels more like revisiting a dream you've had. And sooner or later it sinks in deeper and deeper. And this comes just from reading the script. I think that there is a lot of wisdom in, say, what Anthony Hopkins says, but I think he said read it like 250 times. Now, I don't make a rule about it. And I know Stanislavski talks about how important the first reading is until I carve out space and whatever and sit and be still. For me, really, it's not about those exact numbers or those exact principles of reading. It's simply about a posture of wonder and exploration. And I don't always have it. Sometimes when I'm on a short schedule, I find myself veering more into reading the script to get something out of it. And it's almost impossible for me to create a map in my body when I read it that way. So when I have the time and I am actively working on a project, it's not an audition, it's something I'm cast in and I have the time, I read it and I read it and I read it. And I read it slowly and deliberately, and I spend time with it the way you would a person you were dating. And I begin through that process to create a map in my body so that when I go to do the work, I can remember parts of the script. What if the character was like this? Or, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. That's what I mean by a map in my body, where these islands start popping up for me, and I can visit different places. Sometimes literally in my body, something will light up and I'm like, oh, interesting. And that's now a location in my body where the script lives for now, and that's wonderful. So number 1 is creating a map in my body for the script. Jeremy Strong said this in an interview I saw, and I mentioned this before as well, that when he reads something, he's looking for the magnets that click into his spine. And I think it's a very similar thing for me creating the map. So the second thing I do is explore the sensory world. I was learning about sense memory, affect memory, and was wondering about applying that to a character. So while I can, for example, go back to the home I grew up in until I was 9 years old and open the coat closet in the foyer and literally smell, oh my God, it's crazy. It's crazy how that transports me. I wondered if I could do that with a character. And the first time that I really, really remember sinking into that was I was working on a play for class in around 2011 or 2012 called Two Rooms by Lee Blessing. I mentioned in my favorite books. It's one of my favorite plays. And for some reason, I decided I wanted to deep dive into the sense experience of it. And so Michael, who's one of the characters in the play, talks about Lainey, his wife, which is the role I was working on. And he mentions one of their dates to the beach and seeing her toes in the sand and thinking about turtles. And so I decided I would go with that. And I sat at the beach and I dug my toes in the sand. I could feel the sun, hear the waves, get a sense of Michael's body in the sand next to me. And I just worked this way on that play. And not only is it just fun, but I remember performing, it was my last night in Los Angeles, and I thought I was saying goodbye to acting. And it was the last scene I was doing, and I hadn't ever been transported the way that I had in that performance. Now, there were a lot of factors there, but I think one of the main factors was this sensory work gave my body an experience that I could pull from. Now, what I'm not saying is make up stuff that's not in the script. I pulled something very specifically from the script. So when I do this sensory work, I try to pull directly from what's in the script, but that can get kind of interesting. So something I'm working on right now, one of the characters says about me that I miss feeling safe. And so there are some things that happen in the play, and I can get into the sensory experience of those things happening and smell the room that we're in and see this person coming towards me and experience the uncertainty in my body. So those are kind of some sensory exercises I can do. I find that it really grounds me and it really helps me pull from a foundation when I'm on stage. And I'm not actively pulling from that foundation. I'm not like, here we go, like dredging something up from a well, but it is all fodder for the creative process, and it helps me feel close to the story and the character in a way that I find really, really rewarding. So the second thing is building the sensory experience. Another thing I kind of like to call this is exploring the level. So for Sega Genesis fans out there, my friend had it and growing up and we would play Lion King. And I always loved that point where you like beat the level, especially on that first level where you're baby Simba and you could just like run through the level and all the bad guys were done and you could practice rolling and growling and all the things. And I could spend hours just exploring the level. And that was back when you couldn't go a bunch of places. You were pretty limited to a two-dimensional space, but I loved it. So explore the level, and the level here being the script, right? This is the level you've been given. Explore it and explore the sensory experience of it and spend some time there. The third thing that I do, and this isn't novel, is incorporate everything. When I was shooting Men in the High Castle in 2016, I had a lot of time on my hands in Vancouver, and there were a few things that I did that I realized kind of formed the bedrock of what I would continue to do as an actor. I remember, first of all, I was walking down the street one day, and Vancouver has a very high Asian Canadian population. And I, having lived in Southern California for a very long time, hadn't been among a lot of concentrated Asians because it was like San Diego and then certain parts of like, West Adams, Los Angeles. And I remember feeling this like unsettled feeling, honestly. And I don't know where it came from. I think it's just because it was an unfamiliar experience of realizing that I was walking down the street and it was like 90% Asian Canadians and me. And it hit me that that I was feeling a certain way about it. And then I realized this was perfect for Sarah, who didn't feel at home as an American and didn't feel at home as a Japanese person and was sort of caught between two worlds. And so I just kind of incorporated that into my work, and I walked with Sarah, and I was Sarah on the walk. The other thing I did, I remember I went to a bookstore and I just decided I would pick up a couple of used books. And there was one that I picked out called My Fellow Prisoners, and it was written by a Russian author. And it was about his experience in jail. And it was all of these little vignettes of the people he met. I recommend it if you haven't read it. And it ended up forming a lot. It helped me a lot inform the character. And it wasn't because I was like actively incorporating anything, but I was reading someone live the life of someone under siege and someone who wanted something better but felt limited by the system in place. There was hope in it, but there was also incredible despair. And it really helped anchor me. So I do things like that. I just incorporate everything. I was working on this play that I'm working on now, and my cat was doing something cute, and I was petting her, and all of a sudden it hit me. All of the connections that I, as this person in the play, have had to lose as I've moved around and have followed my husband, and the grief of that. So that's what I mean. Just like incorporate everything. Everything can help your work. You never know what gift the universe is giving you. And I think it's worth noticing Yeah, that's kind of it. I think the overarching concept, though, honestly, that would ground every single one of these. So, internal map of the piece through reading it, exploring the level, sensory work, and incorporating everything. I think the overarching principle that I have with acting is something that actually happened to me in college. I would write down character journals and I'd write all over my script all in pen for some reason. And one day another actor came up to me and she said, "Oh, it's interesting you write in pen." And I was like, "What?" She was like, "I write in pencil just because I think it helps my brain know that nothing is 100% certain." It changed the way that I thought about things. And so with all of these things that I do with acting, I think about it like writing in pencil. Nothing is 100%. I'm just exploring. Nothing is set in stone. So explore, do all the things, and write it in pencil. And have fun. Acting's also really fun, and it's so hard. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I'm curious to hear if you have your own acting methods that you developed over time. That, nothing's really new, I suppose, but we all have our own ways of approaching it. And so hopefully this was helpful in some way. And if you have any questions or anything you want me to cover, feel free to respond in the comments. And thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you later.